Hello, in this video I want to have a look at the suburb of Balmain, directly west, one of the inner suburbs of Sydney. And so just to get a perspective, you can see Sydney Harbour Bridge and where Balmain is. Now it's we'll begin with Callan Park. That was a former hospital for the insane. Again, James Barnett appears. He was the architect who did the original hospital buildings. Now, in this video, I won't go into weights and measures. I'll just go through some of the history of it. So, now Callan Park was saved by public action against the development, and it's a lovely little park on Sydney Harbour. Quite a picturesque spot. But some interesting things are, so for instance, on the water's edge here, we have the former inmates of the hospital did these carvings here in the sandstone, including dates, some of there, for instance, the four-pointed star there, but also that crescent shape, which was the old-fashioned dog tag style as well. So, because there was after the war, there was many soldiers came here to recuperate. Now, the carvings as well, I think is relevant because I want to connect that with something else. But they clearly date. The dates is very clear, and like many other factors. And why that's important, because I want to connect it to another something that one of these things that really gets under my skin and gets spread around and is pure nonsense is the idea that these carvings here carry on, or the so-called Gosford glyphs, and they're repeatedly claimed to be ancient Egyptian. It's bollocks, it's nonsense, it's crap. You can see that the carvings, how sharp they are, the depth of them. They are a modern carving. They would have been weathered. The lichen, the moss, which is also cited by some people to conclusively date them as ancient, is again absolutely nonsense. The lichen and moss actually proves the opposite point. The sharp edges, the type of stone is just the same type of sandstone as we saw there at Callan Park. The idea that these, not only are they amateurish, some people actually caught red-handed. The original description of these in the 70s, since then they've been added to, yet these so-called experts apparently were able to translate these and say that they're ancient, even though they didn't exist until the very early 80s. And so the glyphs that have been added to are included in these translations by these spreaders of nonsense, and the weathering, the lichen, every bit of available information. So even if you don't want to believe the recorded evidence, including this is a form of vandalism. If you don't want to include that, the weathering, the moss, the lichen, all these other features conclusively establish that these are not ancient, and it connects to Callan Park because we can date those, and they are actually more weathered, they are older, and they have the stone is exactly the same. It's only a short distance away. So just to get that out there, because it gets spread around. But the Gosford glyphs, it's a joke. Anyone with even a half an hour research, with a basic understanding of any sort of geology, any of the earth sciences, these are fake. They're bogus. They're not ancient Egyptian. And anyone who says they are, is living in a fantasy land. Okay, and so we come back to Callan Park in Balmain, and here we see this ancient Egyptian bridge. Oh, sorry, it's not ancient Egyptian. Well, maybe it is. Anyway, it could be. Who knows? But anyway, yeah, so again, Callan Park, the connection to the bridge. Now, I've done some videos on the bridge and the connection especially to, such as John Bradfield, the architect, Freemasons, but the proportions of a bridge, the whole thing are very, very occult, and Douglas Grant was one of the patients responsible for the construction of this. Now, again, we're just going to intro this, so I'm just with Callan Park, but now we move away and we go to just up the road. So now we're on Darling Street heading into the heart of Balmain, and here we have the old Masonic Lodge. And the focus of this video, I want to using Balmain as an example, is the especially here in Australia, the importance of mutual aid societies, secret societies, or quasi-secret societies, Freemasons and Oddfellows and Temperance especially. or and the wider temperance movement, which is much more than most people would suspect. Quite an interesting little history of it there. But so, from the Masonic Hall has again these very classical features, which you'll find in the architecture all across Sydney. It's especially the older parts of Sydney really have these, but they're firmly rooted in the esoteric world, and Masonic tracing boards, for instance, have these. But standard feature, well, we see the Corinthian colonnades there. So basically that plan again. This is a canvas once more. So you'll see this everywhere now. It's in a lot of a townhouse design and stuff, and so a standard from the design books. However, in especially things such as Masonic halls, Oddfellows, and other buildings, the ancient symbolism is again very important. It goes back quite some time, but also there you might see there's a little bit of a trace of the compass and square on either side of the statue here. But as we move a short distance up still on Darling Street, we have the post office and courthouse building. Relevant because, well, for one, James Barnett was the original architect, and some renovations were done later, and that was by the architect George McRae. My most recent upload regarding the QVB or Queen Victoria building, as well as Sydney Town Hall, showed how George McRae is an architect who very much involved in this occult design and putting hidden meanings in the buildings through symbolism, weights and measures, and many other points. And James Barnett's been a regular throughout this series and previous videos regarding Sydney. Hugely important through the history of Australian architecture, the father of Australian colonial architecture. Even the banner for the state seal, for emblem for the state of New South Wales, was by his design. But here we have the post office courthouse building. Now, so we have, well, 2 points. So in a traditional tracing board for Freemasons, Oddfellows, other groups, we have the three Greek columns: Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. So this building on itself, there we see the Corinthian architecture either side of a clock. Again, that a canvas motif. While the colonnades, or of the Doric order, which are very simple, basically the round columns, or when it's as a colonnade, it's usually in square fashion. But there, beneath the tower on the front doors, we have Doric columns. It's the simplest of the three, the oldest of the three of the Greek architectural schools, and another reference to a canvas and the Corinthian order. What we don't have on this building is the Ionic school of architecture. However, that system is filled out, and we'll see in a moment, because as we move directly next door to this is the Balmain Town Hall building, which is built around the Ionic order. So what we have is that these buildings complementing each other and to complete the series of Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. The Doric order represents male, it's or the column of strength. The Ionic column represents the female, the column of wisdom, and the Corinthian order represents the virgin, or the column of beauty. So, and there's much more to it, including reference to the senses and so many other things. But if you're interested in this particular topic, the origins and as well as the symbolism connected to the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian orders are pretty much a must in this particular area, especially in regards to weights and measures. So throughout all my videos, that's a constant theme, and the ancient scales of measures included Doric and Ionic, such as in the Parthenon, and we also find it all across the Greco-Roman world. So there we have the post office building, James Barnett as well as George McRae being architects in there, so that in itself tells a lot. In itself, it's as good as a confirmation that it is esoteric in nature, that there is occult knowledge hidden inside these buildings. So anyway, next door to that we have the town hall, and not too much to report on that, but it does complete out the three orders though. So for instance, we see you'll see, I'll zoom in on the columns in a moment, and there are the Ionic order, these swirls on a simple capital, the capital having these swirls, but even the balustrades there also have it. So again, it just these buildings complement and fill each other out. Yeah, it's it's great to study, but again, when you visit these sites, there's always little surprises to be found, and especially again, reading the plaques, as Half a Sheep in a recent video commented, there's something to that. So you don't have to travel to Greece and Rome and all these other places necessarily to get a hint of it. You might be surprised how much is in your part of the world and how deeply it is rooted. And so you can. I'd love to travel to these ancient sites, planning on doing it, but you can also extract quite a bit and find the legacy of it in your own hometown. Next, we have the Temperance Lodge, just off Montague Street, just around the corner from the post office and courthouse building. The Temperance Lodge and the Temperance Society. So there we see the side entrance to the Temperance Lodge, and you'll notice just above the door the little triangle there, which has like a little bit of stained glass in there, which has love, purity, and fidelity. And we'll see that now. So we got this is one of the emblems of the temperance movement. If you've heard of it, you probably, like I assumed, it was just basically a movement against alcoholism at the time, but it's actually much deeper than that and very strong connections. It was a mutual aid society and what's often described as a quasi-secret society. So it had the same patterns. Well, it's very Masonic in that way. So, but also more than just a social movement, it was a friendly society. So it operated, for instance, the T&G Society, the Temperance and General, social services, social insurance, health insurance, big buildings all across Australia. So there was quite a bit of money involved in there, and so. Most often, again, you'll hear it just referred to as this movement, which was against alcoholism, but it was based on Masonic principles, as we see in these, the All Saying I, all the other same things, a system of ritual and initiation, as well as, so it just basically, it was a secret society and had all the emblems and as a mutual aid society was also eventually, it's like with so many other mutual aid societies, it's been demutualised, but at the time it was a way for the working man. He got access to health insurance, credit, all these really basic services we take for granted. You just get on the phone now and you call them, but at the time these weren't available unless you were a member or accessed it through these secret societies: Masons, Oddfellows, Temperance, few others that escape me at the moment. But again, we see that the Temperance Hall next to the Temperance Lodge, we have the standard temperance symbols, but also the Masonic symbols, just to show the connection to this esoteric world. So again, it's interesting because you think you sort of know about these things, but there's always another layer to it. And again, it's written in our streets and written in the history of our society. There's no other way to put it. There was a conspiracy by the elite to break up the Oddfellows, Freemasons, Temperance, and these other groups which are offering mutual aid. The legal and medical establishment and elite hated the idea that groups such as this were offering insurance, medical, legal care cheaply to the working man. And our modern free society owes so much to these organisations. And well, Temperance has been, the T&G, the IOOF, the AMP have all been demutualised, but not too long ago they were a true mutual aid society, and society in whole benefited strongly from this. Now, another example is just down Darling Street. So that, if you just basically walk down Darling Street, with the exception of a Temperance Lodge and Temperance Hall, you'll see examples of this written in the legacy of how important these organisations were. So that's the Post Office and Courthouse by James Barnett and George McRae renovated. And here we have the Working Men's Institute, which has strong connections, was basically set up by the Oddfellows movement. And again, Oddfellows, very esoteric, quasi-secret society who had so much to do with the founding of all these standard services, but for instance, the Working Men's Institute, as the name implies, was very strongly concerned with the labour rights movement. Again, these rights and these things we take for granted now were set up by and petitioned by and organised by these organisations, which is one of the reasons why it's under my skin a bit that they're so demonised. By and connected to the so-called elites. Now, the elites have taken over so they've been demutualised, these organisations, and they've been taken over. But in their origins, until very recent history, they were mutual organisations who offered really important, really beneficial, brilliant services to the people. So yeah, these organisations which are now demonised too often by people who claim to be protecting these sort of basic social rights, were actually set up by these organisations. So it's a little, the world's upside down in that part. But regarding this building again, it has all the architectural symbols. So the bottom floor we have the Doric order, Ionic order, and above that we have the Corinthian order with the a canvas leaf design, as well as we'll see at the very top on the pediment. But for instance, there we see Corinthian colonnades and the canvas leaf. And the Oddfellows, not as well known as the Masons, but so much similarities and the symbolism, the concept of mutual aid societies against established government, against the elite. This is what they were involved in. And so just like on a Mason tracing board, you see the three pillars, which were Doric, Ionic and Corinthian. You'll also find that as a standard symbol across the Oddfellows tracing boards. And again, this a canvas coming through again. So there you see a celestial sphere, so that's a reference to astronomy, to the zodiac. A canvas scrolling, and also you might notice in that central pillar there's a canvas leaf. Now again, on the inside, it's one of these symbols that goes on. So again, we've become illiterate to symbology. We've forgotten our history, and we've forgotten who was responsible for so many of the good things about our modern secular society. And it was Freemasons, Oddfellows, Druids, and the temperance groups, undoubtedly. It's not really up for debate, but yet, especially on YouTube, you'll see it getting pushed. But also the original concept of the demonisation of these organisations come out of the elite, which the people protest against so much. So again, that's something that really needs to be repaired. So a short distance down from the Working Men's Institute is the Unity Hall Hotel. Now first, basically right next door to that, we have what is now the Westpac Bank building. That's interesting, well, because again, this building has very strong symbolism connecting to the occult world, esoteric world. But we get a hint of it there with the acanthus scrolling, the sheaf of wheat, which above that also has the hanging lamb from the Order of the Golden Fleece. The corbels, I'm not sure if they're technically corbels, but underneath there, acanthus leaf scrolling as well, but also the columns on either side of the Corinthian order, very original Corinthian order, the original style of the Greek one, which is sometimes stylized, but this is effectively the design of Callimachus, again acanthus connections to that. And so I'm not too sure of the history of this building, original occupants, but I wouldn't be surprised that it was a link to there. But you'll find that banking and mining buildings, including the modern ones, in the modernist style, will still include usually in weights and measures, but in symbolism in one form or another will include these. So it's very specific to those particular industries, and again because of their origins and connections to the esoteric as well. So, but in front of that we have the War Memorial, and these are one of the key. Basically, where there's a War Memorial, we're going to find something else. But for instance, we have the Unity Hall Hotel. The shaking hands, well, as we'll see, it's a very strong symbol connecting especially to Oddfellows, but the Unity Hall Hotel itself was one of the original meeting places for the Australian Labor Party. Again, these organisations, because the Unity Hall Hotel got its licence from the Oddfellow Hotel earlier, and again, just this very strong connection between the labour movement, social insurance, social protection, all these really good things about our society connected to these organisations, which again are often vilified and connected as if they're purely elite. But for instance, the Oddfellows was the largest fraternal organisation, had 2 million members worldwide, hundreds of thousands in Australia. And there we see the shaking hand, which is another reference. Now, so we had now again, just a very short distance down from there, we have the old Oddfellows Lodge, and so next to it there's a nice church there, but not relevant to this point at the moment. But there we see the lodge and the Oddfellows Hall. Oddfellows Hall. But this is one of the later Oddfellows Hall. There is a earlier one, an older one, and that's basically down at the very end of Darling Street, 59 Darling Street, I think it is, in Balmain. So that's you just follow the road along Darling Street, and you'll see there's this really strong history in Balmain connected to social insurance and the development of a more egalitarian society, a society against the elite, if you want to put it that way. But too often it's these things are spoken of incorrectly because they're not understood. So, for instance, the Oddfellow. Now, it's a very nice tie-in. If you saw above the door, we saw the caduceus there and how it's connected to the medical traditions, and it's just a lovely little coincidence, a tie-in there. So, and there in the lovely view from there, we get the Sydney Harbour Bridge. I've done some connections. So, for instance, Freemasons very important in the construction of that, and the whole Sydney Harbour Bridge. You know, it's got all of the glorious numbers and proportions that define so much of the occult schools in architecture and the way that this knowledge is passed on and preserved. And it's much more than just this. The Hermetic knowledge, but it's also about the wider principles of equality, egalitarianism, and anti-elitism. Unfortunately, since all these mutual aid organisations have almost to the last few have been demutualised, that's where some of the confusion, I think, comes in, and I'm hoping to address some of that. So. Balmain's another example. In Sydney, there are a few other older buildings, some still existing, some demolished, but they preserve this history and the importance of these particular organisations and the good works that they do. So anyway, I'll end that little piece for now. Actually, I'll just do a little piece. Let me get the video together. There's another important building in regards to the Oddfellows, and now it's called the St James Trust Building, but it's the former Manchester Unity Independent Order of Oddfellows building. But on the corner of Hyde Park, touched on it in an earlier video, but we have this war memorial for the Oddfellows, but actually by the Grand United Oddfellows, which are different to Manchester Unity, and that's something I'll try and cover in the future, because it's a long, the history of the Oddfellows especially, very interesting, and very little about it. This is not only because it's an Oddfellows monument and in Hyde Park, which again is one of these sites in Sydney which is overflowing with this esoteric symbolism, but in the background there we have what used to be the Manchester Unity IOOF building, and I'll bring up some pictures as to some older pictures. So, for instance, there we see the Oddfellows Memorial and the Manchester Unity building. That larger building on the left-hand side is the Great Synagogue of Sydney, another lovely building in regards to architecture and so on. The former Manchester Unity Independent Order of Oddfellows building is also, using the symbols, architectural symbols especially, to display. Again, they're just sort of standard. So we're in the tracing boards, ancient origins going to Greco-Roman period. But for instance, the columns at the front, they're Corinthian, but they're a variant of Corinthian, similar as James Barnett used in Centennial Park. So they're a fusion of Corinthian and the lotus leaf. But we'll also find once again, a canvas corbels, and this again Roman symbolism, Greco-Roman symbolism as well in the design of the decorations and other parts. So that's Elizabeth Street. You have the Oddfellows Memorial there. A short distance down we have the obelisk, 72 feet obelisk as well. Not much. So the St. James Trust building, as it's now known, but again, the same set of architectural features which I've gone through in this video and so many others. Here we see a canvas leaf, so it's a Corinthian column, but it has the lotus design on it as well, which is a interesting little point. This, of course, we see again on the inside of the building. And now it's been, the building was sold and taken over by other interests, but historically we see, firstly, how being such a large building at the time of its construction testifies to the reach and the money involved in this organisation when it was a mutual organisation. Hundreds of thousands of members across Australia put their money in for a mutual fund. They got good insurance, they got good pharmacy was organised through this, good doctors, good works were organised through here. But as we've virtually all of these organisations, they've become private, for-profit, demutualised businesses, and that's quite a shame, because now again, these have been demonised. They're constantly vilified. Anything connected to this is instantly attached to nefarious, evil, whatever. But some people, like in Australia, for instance, the IOOF, again, it's a private company. What does IOOF stand for? It's curious because that's the ad that they run. Well, it stands for Independent Order of Oddfellows. Even their symbol itself is a reference to the vesica, as we see there. It's a major sponsor of sporting events. It's one of the largest financial services organisations in Australia, and yet little to nothing is known about it by the general public. Now, just to the point of the true history of these organisations being written out, because the establishment doesn't like people organising, and these type of organisations were a threat to the elite, and that's why they were taken over and have been written out of history. So, for instance, we've got a couple collect old encyclopedias. World Book 1973 has almost a page. One half of a page is dedicated to the Oddfellows, talks about their organisation history, etc. Yet by the year 2000, at which point now the Independent Order of Oddfellows in Australia, Canada, New Zealand and America is as large as ever, except that they've been demutualised and they've been written out of the books. Now, this is something which is especially noteworthy in the current period, because digitally history is being rewritten or de-written. It's been taken out of, and there's so little to find. But if you plug in conspiracy, demonic or whatever, something like that, you'll get a flood of misinformation in regards to this. But while the good works and the good origins and is slowly being lost, but in hard print versions this is a proof. So before the internet and digital information took over, there was already a pattern to remove this part of Australian history, but again, Canadian, US, and New Zealand history, English too, to remove that from the books. And well, that's anyway. So with that, I'll leave it now. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you got something out of it. Again, the actual history of these things, the verifiable, the good works of these organisations, Temperance, Oddfellows, Druids, and Masons, is traceable. It's very strong. It's not. This is not conjecture on my part, and yet sadly, these things have well now turned into hysterics is another way to put it, and misinformation. And with that, I'll say goodbye and have a good one.